Speaker, and I am very pleased to be able to speak on this report and this inquiry into family, domestic and sexual violence, and pleased to see fellow committee members in the chamber here with me and committee chair, and acknowledge the work that we all did together in this very, very important inquiry. It was a privilege for me to be a member of the committee for this inquiry, and its work was at times heartbreaking in its findings. I want to acknowledge the contributions and the testimonies from individuals who shared their experiences of family, domestic and sexual violence, because their voices were so vital to this process, and I do want to thank them for sharing their stories. Please know that your efforts were not in vain. I also want to thank all the service providers and the experts who shared their knowledge and their experience with the committee. The breadth and the quality of the evidence that we gathered made it clear just how much more work there is to be done in this country to address family violence. The national conversation we are having at the moment about violence against women is incredibly important. We know that in Australia, one woman is murdered by her current or former domestic partner every week. Since this inquiry commenced in June last year, more than 40 women will have been murdered by their current or former partner. This just should not be acceptable in our country. If it was happening in any other setting other than a domestic setting, it would rightly be seen and talked about as a national emergency. And so what is needed is an ambitious and an urgent response. And this inquiry went some of the way to try and working out what we need to do next. There were more than 350 submissions, 47 confidential submissions, 16 days of inquiries and 90 hours of evidence over many months. And that culminated in the 88 recommendations, which we hope will inform the development of the next national plan, and that are grouped across 5 key themes. That the next national plan should involve a more uniform approach across jurisdictions, that the next national plan must seek to engender a culture of accountability and greater workforce support, that education is critical, that there remains a greater need for greater awareness and understanding of the many forms of family violence, that the welfare of victim survivors and their children should be paramount, and that the next national plan must continue to hold perpetrators to account for their use of violence. And those of us who are Labor members of this committee had some additional comments that we wanted to make, because the evidence taken by the committee was unequivocal. The scale of this problem is greater than either the resources or the resolve that the Australian government has currently brought to the task. So we added to the committee's findings that there is the need for a proper policy process as the next national plan is developed. There must be adequate and informed consultation as part of the development of that plan. That we must consider the implications of the federal government's inaction on previous inquiries and the need for us to learn from the mass of work that has already been done in this area, including the Victorian Royal Commission. And as a member from Victoria, I must commend the Victorian government for the way it has been leading government's responses in this space and for the work that is underway in my home state. And the recognition of the Commonwealth's role and the ability of the Commonwealth to do more in areas that we have control of, including in particular the strong evidence received by the committee for the need for the introduction of 10 days paid domestic violence leave per year for victim survivors. When you think about all of the impacts on a person's lives when they're experiencing family violence, it makes basic sense that they would have space and time from their workplace to try and deal with some of those implications, and there's a clear role for the Commonwealth to step in here. Deputy Speaker, I actually spent last night watching the latest episode of Jess Hill's excellent documentary, See What You Made Me Do. And I think that documentary does an excellent job of publicly conveying many of the things that were highlighted to us during this inquiry. The pervasive terror that too many women live under, and the massive gaps that remain in the systems that should support and protect them. The way that First Nations women disproportionately experience this, and the entitlement and sense of control that too many men seem to believe they have the right to exercise over women. We must be prepared to confront this. Our response to family violence must be about resetting the norms in our society that implicitly tell men they are entitled to harm women. And while I welcome this report, and I believe its 88 recommendations must be urgently implemented, I do very much fear that this government is not up to the task, because this is a government that for 8 years ignored and neglected women's safety. In fact, a government that since coming to office has spent as much on government advertising as they have helping to stop family violence. It's a government that seems to be playing catch-up now, that it's realised it has a political problem in the women's space, with women feeling ignored, unheard and unsupported throughout its term. And so it is hard to feel confident that this is the government that we need to address the horrific levels of violence that Australian women are experiencing. It's hard to imagine that this government is going to address the underlying issue of gender inequality. And we see that in this place this week, where members who have targeted women in behaviour online continue to hold important positions in this place and are not being held to account by the government. What does this say around that sense of entitlement that I've been talking about? What does this say to men that they're allowed to do to women when we in this place continue to condone this kind of behaviour? The government has put money into some of these services in the budget this week, and that is welcome, but it's not enough.
$1.1 billion is a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, but it's catch-up from money that hasn't been there in the past. And we do need more. We do need a greater commitment. And we do need this understanding that funding of frontline services is absolutely essential. Funding of our courts, of the systems that sit around it, the training that we need that helps women get out of these situations is absolutely essential. But funding of the problems that get women to this place in the first place, funding for education, for the things that will change men's behaviours, for the things that will change the structures in our society that create these inequalities, that funding is essential as well. And that's what I want to see more of from this government, and that's what I know a Labor government would do. Because we are committed not just to addressing family and domestic violence, but to addressing so many of those things that are the driving forces of this. The fact that women are so often unequal in our financial security. The fact that most women earn less money than men. And again, in this budget, what we did not see was any substantial increase in wages for the areas where women predominantly work. Our childcare sector, our aged care workers, people working in disability services. These services are predominantly staffed by females, and yet there was nothing in this budget that will raise their wages. And by perpetuating these inequalities, we're perpetuating some of the structures that mean that women are at risk of family and domestic violence at a much higher level than men. So some of the things that I've just been proud to be in Labor's women's budget statement, and some of the things that Labor believes we need to address some of these underlying issues, are a national gender equality strategy, so that we can look at these issues across the breadth of government, across everything we do, and work on this as a holistic issue. We do need gender-responsive budgeting. We should know how everything in the budget affects women and how it is helping women to get to a more equal position in our community. And of course, we do need equal representation in this place, because I do not think that we would be having this conversation today. I do not think that this report would have been written in the way that it has today if there were not enough women in this place who are helping to support the many men I know who also want to champion this, but to raise it as an issue and to make sure that it is front and centre. And the many women outside this place who also have been raising their voice. The women who stood out the front of this place and protested. The brave young women who came forward and told their stories. The victim survivors who told their stories to this committee. Those women, I have to pay tribute to their bravery and their courage. And I have to say again that while I stand in this place, I will do everything I can to make sure that your courage and your bravery does not go unnoticed, that it gets acted upon, and that you get the response you need, and that our country needs to end this. Enough is enough. It is time to end the scourge of domestic and family violence. We need more.
The question is that the document be noted. The member for Bass.
Thank you very much, Mr.